All right, this one's going to be a fun one. Seeing as some of the last few games that I've been playing and have reviewed for you guys have been remakes, talking about the remaster of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, Resident Evil 3, and now Final Fantasy 7 Remake, my mind started to wander, and I thought, what would be a cool feature for this weekend? And I thought, you know what? Why don't we talk about 10 PlayStation 1 games that I think would make for a very cool remake, or, you know, games that we haven't seen in a long time. So these are games that I personally would like to see get remade, and I'm talking about going back to the source material and redoing everything with modern technology and modern design philosophy, taking the best of what was there in the past, but reutilizing things and shifting things in ways that would appeal to a modern audience out there. And I've got 10 games that I'm going to talk about right now. And we're going to start with a little Psygnosis trilogy. Psygnosis was a very important developer for PlayStation when it first launched in 1995. Some of the coolest games came out of Psygnosis for the platform. Very forward-looking, beautiful-looking games. Of course, Wipeout, I think, was their big, massive superstar game out there, but they also did the Destruction Derby, and they did these 3 games. And I'm going to start with Colony Wars, and that one came out in 1997, and it was good enough to warrant a sequel. It was praised by everybody, including yours truly. Beautiful space shooter, but it's kind of, a simulation light type game with a very cool sci-fi story, but beautiful production values, lots of great little story bits filtering in, and it was just such a fun time to fly around in space and blast at all kinds of bad guys. Just a great design ethos with the game, and just a wonderful, sense of taking us out of our everyday life and transporting us to this really cool sci-fi universe that they created. And it's been a long time since we've seen Colony Wars. There was a sequel for PlayStation 1, and there were also PC versions of the game, I believe. But this is a game that I hear from, not just me, from lots of people out there that have been following the PlayStation releases since the beginning. A lot of us out there would love to see Colony Wars remade and revisited for sure. Frankly, we don't get enough super cool modern space shooter simulation type games out there. So I hope Sony or someone that picks up the Psygnosis catalog is able to revisit this game and make us a brand new Colony Wars. That would be awesome.
This is Command. All civilian craft have been destroyed. Return to base.
And the same thing I would say for Gpolice, which came out in 1997. This was also a flying game, but it was kind of like you were taking control of one of the spinner cars in Blade Runner, Ridley Scott's seminal sci-fi film. It's a VTOL craft, so vertical takeoff and landing, and you could fly wherever you want, and you're flying around these modern cities, but the draw distance on the PlayStation 1 game was crap. You really couldn't see anywhere, so like an enemy that you might be pursuing, because that's what you're doing, you're getting into dogfights in the middle of these cities and stuff, but people would like turn a corner and they would be totally lost because the draw distance on the PlayStation, it just couldn't keep up. The technology was just not there for the imagination of this game. And who wouldn't want to play a Blade Runner style cop in a vertical takeoff and landing experience with modern tech? That would be amazing. And there's Gpolice sitting there with all of that mythology and the world building, and there is, I don't think it was a super huge success, but there was a built-in audience for the game and an awareness for it. And it would be really, really fun for a developer to say, yep, I'm going to go back into the Psygnosis catalog and I'm going to bring Gpolice back for modern players. Now, the other game that I'm going to talk about with Psygnosis is called Assault Rigs, and this is a smaller game. It didn't blow anybody away when it first came out, except for the fact that it was very reminiscent of Tron. It's basically a tank-style combat experience, which is timeless, because, some of the earliest video games involved 2 tanks shooting at each other. But this was all kind of like from a cyber perspective. It was like a virtual world that you were cruising around in, and Psygnosis had fun with the world building and the cool music, just this really cool punky cyber kind of aesthetic that they let permeate throughout the experience. And I remember being very, very impressed with this title and feeling like I was playing something akin to a Tron type of experience. And I guess, truthfully, it's more of a Tron game that lets us play with Tron tanks like Assault Rigs that I would prefer, but we never really got that. We didn't get Tron Tank or Tron Tank versus Recognizer, and this was not quite that. It certainly is a little bit more goofy, and there was, a lot of disparity from level to level and stuff. There wasn't this sort of art style that kept all the way through. They played with it quite a bit. But one of the styles that they definitely filtered into this was very reminiscent of Tron. I just thought it was a lot of fun to play, and I think it would be a great part of a package of Psygnosis remakes. So that's why Assault Rigs is on this list. Now, the next remake that I want from the PlayStation 1 era is a remake of Neversoft's incredible, indelible Tony Hawk Pro Skater games. I'm talking remake 1 and 2 into one game. So all of the content and all of the features and secrets and cheats and levels that were a part of both games, retool them, remake them, and just make them a super package. Because I think what happened is they came out with something extraordinary in 1999 with the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game, but they killed it with the second one. They just refined, and it was pretty much perfect by the time Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 came out. So I would like to see that original kind of design philosophy from the core first experience retooled with all of the stuff that's in the second game. All of that cool music from back in the day that was attached to this game, re-licensed with this game, with the idea that you would let people stream these levels with the music on and not flag the copyrights. Come on, Activision. Let us enjoy the sonic experience of playing the Tony Hawk games to their fullest degree. But we were talking about incredible ideas, you know, just super fun, accessible skateboarding that it was an homage to the real life sport of skateboarding, but it was all amped up to 11 and very cartoony and crazy. And I think that's what you would want to do with the remake of this game, is you wouldn't want to make it super hyper realistic. You wouldn't want to venture anywhere near the skate territory. You're not looking for this to be the real skaters game. This should be an accessible game for anybody to come into. All of the pros that are in the game should be, you know, animated with a cartoony kind of flair and style, and all of the clothing and all of the crazy characters that they could add to it. You know, going back into the Activision library, I would assume Activision would be the publisher on this. It would be amazing if they could get Spider-Man back into this, because one of the coolest things about 2 was the ability to skate around as Spider-Man. Are you kidding me? Yeah, these are incredible games. And I know that they remastered 2, or they remade it and it wasn't that great, and then they had the, they've had a lot of not great Tony Hawk games, and I think the idea here would be to go back and to lovingly craft something that was a total beautiful homage to the exceptional work that was a part of Tony Hawk 1 and 2 into one package. It would blow everybody away. The world is ready for it. Of course, Metal Gear Solid from 1998, Konami and Kojima, when they were in perfect harmony, building something so sublime, so out of nowhere that just completely shocked everybody. Such a beautiful masterwork, story-driven, indelible characters, lots of great action sequences, but a real, emphasis on getting us to kind of, wait before we leapt into action, and training us as players to have some patience and to, see how we could subvert the expectations of, a lot of traditional action games out there. Lots of incredible gadgets, lots of memorable moments, and, just an awesome story and an awesome reintroduction or real introduction to Solid Snake in a way that I think is just ripe for a revisit and an embellishment. Take all of the beautiful sort of mythology and all of the storytelling that's gone into Metal Gear 1 with a real awareness of all of the other subsequent episodes of Metal Gear Solid and the side stories and the diversions that we've had in Metal Gear in general, and just make something that remakes the original, but also reboots it all again for us in a really profound way. That would be incredible, and what would make it really incredible is if it was led by Kojima himself. Sled Storm. Now, this came out in 1999 on the PlayStation 1, and it was kind of a revelation because nobody expected it. And I love, when I go through my PlayStation 1 games and I see all of these discs, I see developers having a lot of freedom to just experiment and try different things. And this was kind of like the wintry answer to Nintendo's sublime Wave Race on Nintendo 64, which is still one of my favorite extreme sports racing experiences. And I love when video games get off city streets and go off-roading and let us experience crazy weather and crazy conditions to race around in. And Sled Storm delivered that. It also had a kooky sense of humor. The fact that Rob Zombie had the title track in the setup video for this game, I think kind of tipped its hat that this was not a game that really took itself too seriously. The characters are screaming out the tricks that they're pulling off as they're jumping off of, hills and stuff. Just had a great attitude, and it was really fun, and the frame rate was great, and I could just imagine what somebody could do with PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X kind of architecture with a game like Sled Storm. They could totally retool it and just make it incredible. Like, we would feel the snow pelting us in the face. Now, I know there was a PlayStation 2 game, I believe, trying to reboot Sled Storm again, and it was okay. I think it tried to be a little more realistic. And I feel like when you go back for a lot of this stuff, you kind of don't want to be too realistic. It's the same thing if EA said, look, let's make another SSX. You can't go back to those franchises and try to make them feel, like you would really shred down a mountain, So I would love a new Sled Storm, but made with this sort of goofy kind of sensibility that went into the first one, which was on the PlayStation 1. Flamer! And it's funny, EA gets a bad rap, but they've done a lot of experimentation with different games over the years, and they did a lot of it during the PlayStation 1 era for sure. A game that I've talked about in Buried Treasures before that I think would be great as a remake is Future Cop LAPD. This came out in 1998. It was developed by EA Redwood Shores. It did not do well, though, so I think the chances are very poor that we would ever get a remake of this game, but it was a very, very cool game. It was kind of a top-down action experience akin to what EA had done with the Strike games, the helicopter flying games that we'd seen start on the Sega Genesis. But LAPD you were piloting a mech that could transform into a hover car kind of thing, so right there, that's cool. And you're taking out all kinds of gang members and blowing them apart in lots of violent ways. It was kind of over-the-top violent, like a RoboCop movie or something. So that was one part of the gameplay. That was like the crime wave part of the gameplay. But there was also a precinct mode where you were kind of playing a MOBA, taking over different precincts and taking over your opponent's territory, and you had all kinds of resources that you could pull out and turrets and things that you could use to help you win your objectives. And it was very, very well crafted. Lots of great little details. Of course, that overhead perspective and the 3D technology, even back, in 1998, gave EA a lot of freedom to create something that moved quickly, had lots of little tiny cool details, and was really fun to play. Didn't matter which way you played the game. It was very enjoyable to play. It was a great multiplayer game as well. I think there was a PC version of this title as well, which allowed people to play online, which is super cool. And clearly, there could be something set in a kind of a Blade Runner sort of esque kind of world, a dystopian kind of reality, or Blade Runner / RoboCop kind of world, where you could have two sides of a confrontation go at it head to head with some of these kinds of design ideas. I think that could be really, really fun. I know that this has a very low chance of ever happening, but I would be very happy with a remake of Future Cop LAPD.
Watch it, they've got air support.
In 1999, we got the sublime Driver from Reflections, and this was a game that blew us all away when it came out. Of course, there's been lots of influence from Driver, and we've seen elements from the Driver franchise in games like Burnout, even in Grand Theft Auto. And there's been great sequels to Driver as well. I've talked about Driver San Francisco not too long ago, but the original Driver is still really, really cool stuff. You play an undercover cop who's trying to take over this criminal sort of syndicate, and to do that, you've got to become this driver and whip around. But it was really not, the story bits were nice. It was cool to get these little moments that would take you into the narrative of why you were doing all of this stuff. But really, what sold this game was the unbelievable adherence to the game's physics and you having to understand and contend with them. You were really fighting with the machinery, but it felt so satisfying when you were able to pull off the power slides and whip around corners quickly and navigate through busy city traffic and just become a really proficient driver in the game. And yes, we've played lots and lots of fantastic 3D racing experiences since then, but I think there could be something really wonderful in the effort to remake and recraft that original Driver, and I guess reboot the whole idea of this game as the launch for another franchise or a new take on the franchise. It was amazing, and even though we've got a massive library of console racing games, and a lot of them are very good, I still think there's room for a remake of the original Driver. Also in 99, developed by a company called Eidetic, which became Sony Bend, is Syphon Filter. And I think this comes up all the time when people talk about Sony franchises and where has Gabriel Logan been and where has this franchise been for so long. But I think what would be really cool here is for Sony Bend and PlayStation to go back to the first game and remake it from the ground up. Use a lot of the design ideas and the story ideas, but retool everything for the modern day. This was a cool take on stealth action with lots of great gadgets and a globe-trotting story and lots of interesting characters that have filtered throughout subsequent sequels. On the original PlayStation, there were some PSP games that were pretty cool. And we also got some hints dropped about this universe in Days Gone last year. So I think it's time for Sony Bend to go back to what kind of really propelled them to the, center stage. This was a great franchise. It wasn't perfect. It certainly didn't sort of hit the highs of Metal Gear or Splinter Cell, but it was still a really fun escape. And I think that Sony could have a blast going back to the beginning and giving us Syphon Filter as a fresh new property. Now, the last one on my list I know is a weird one, and I'm probably going to get a lot of huhs and shrugs and you missed all of these games, in the comments below. And that's what the comments are for, by the way. If you don't like my suggestions, and these aren't the definitive ones, they're just 10 that I've come up with. There's a huge, huge library on the PlayStation 1. There's lots of games that deserve the remake treatment, but these are my 10. And if you don't like them, let us know what you would pick in the comments down below. But my last one is a game called Jumping Flash, which came out in 1995 with the launch of the PlayStation 1. And I remember it creating a sense of vertigo because this was a first-person platform game, and you were kind of inside of this mechanical robot. It was cute and cutesy, and the music was, irritating, and it would get into your head, but you were so transported into this idea of peering out of the eyes of this thing and jumping super high and getting super on platforms and stuff and climbing up to these very high edges and then looking down and then jumping. And it gave you that sense of, oh my God, I'm traveling through space in a very effective way. And of course, we've seen different developers attempt to create first-person platforming experiences to varying degrees of success. Awesome games like Mirror's Edge and even the recent Doom Eternal have been able to employ that idea of platform hopping and navigating through 3D space in some really incredible ways. But it hasn't always worked. But what was amazing is that Jumping Flash kind of worked. It had rudimentary design. Even back then, it didn't look that great. But it was a cool idea, and I just think a remake would be fun for longtime PlayStation fans out there. And I also think that we have so much grittiness in a lot of the first-person stuff that we play. It'd be fun to kind of have something cutesy and accessible. What comes to my mind when I think about what they could do in terms of styling, I think of Penny Parker from the Spider-Verse and her spider mech kind of creation. It would be fun to play a Jumping Flash game which, evoked a little bit of that, a little anime kind of vibe to it. I think that would be great. Okay, but that's not all. I did send out a tweet asking people to send me their picks for PS1 games that they think should be remade, and I got some great suggestions, as I always do. This one's from Alfonso the Six, who says, "This is so easy," with a picture of Vagrant Story. I got a lot of people talking about their favorite RPGs. A lot of Suikoudens. I love Suikoden as well. From Naka, I got Dino Crisis. That was that crazy Resident Evil-like game from Capcom, except everything was dinosaurs. I remember thinking that was a lot of fun, but it was very, very crazy. And a remake would be great, especially in the vein of 2 and 3, Resident Evil 2 and 3. We've got The Process Lives saying Tenchu Stealth Assassins. That will always be my answer to this question. I think Sekiro was kind of in that vein, but yeah, a real honest-to-goodness remake of Tenchu, that would be incredible. Our buddy Chris Baker, Cbake76 on Twitter, who's a huge superhero video game fan like I am, says there's already a pretty decent engine for it out there, and he put a picture of Spider-Man for PlayStation 1. That was almost on my list, but I feel Insomniac is doing such a great job with their take on Spider-Man that it would be a bit weird to go back to that Neversoft Activision classic, but it would be pretty rad to get that game remade, huh? That'd be so much fun. A great suggestion for a mech game called Omega Boost from Just Guard on Twitter. John Cadia says something that I wholeheartedly agree with. It's Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. This was the Silicon Knights classic, which was so mature and so weird that you were playing an evil dude that had to suck the blood of people to survive and to flourish. But it was great, even though it was murky and really hard to make out all the details. Incredible game with a really, really robust and wonderful story. That is ripe for a remake. You are correct about that. Who would own the rights to that? I guess Crystal Dynamics had the rights, and they're owned by Square Enix, but I don't know if that would ever get made, but it would be amazing if it did. DJ Granblue has got a whole bunch of suggestions. Says any below: Chrono Cross, Final Fantasy Tactics, yeah, I'm all for that one. Xenogears, Wild Arms, Legend of Dragoon. There's a whole bunch of role-playing, JRPG type of experiences. Final Fantasy Tactics, though, yeah, that would be incredible to see something like that get remade with maybe the fidelity of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm all for that, and something that could be ported across all the platforms. It would be incredible on Nintendo Switch. Just saying. Otaku Gamer says Jet Moto, please. And there's another example of, some crazy environmental racing, which is sort of off the beaten path, with these super fast hover bikes. It was an answer to the success of Wipeout and the success of F-Zero and stuff. Not quite that caliber, but a modern remake of Jet Moto certainly could be. The Art of Adam says Mega Man Legends, and something tells me that we're gonna, with all of the classic revisits that Capcom has been doing, all of these legacy collections, and bringing back all of these awesome classic games, and I know they've been very successful and very popular. I've loved revisiting all those games. Something is probably cooking with Mega Man in some pretty massive ways. Also, what they're doing with Resident Evil, Devil May Cry 5. I think Capcom is digging into its roots, and we're probably going to see some phenomenal stuff with the Mega Man franchise. I mean, can you guys wrap your minds around Mega Man games on PS5 and the new Xbox? Those are going to be crazy. The last one on the list here is Irritating Stick. This was from Dat Fu Nem, said, played this on a demo disc back in the day and never bought it. And then in all caps, regrets. I've never played this game. I don't even know if I have it in our collection, but it certainly lived on in infamy, and it would be pretty crazy for somebody to say, I want to remake Irritating Stick. That's what I want as my job in video games, is to remake Irritating Stick.
Welcome to Irritating Stick!
But you know what? Remakes are going to be a part of our business. What I'm really starting to recognize after more than 25 years in this industry is there's so much fantastic classic content for developers to go back to and revisit and flesh out again, because what you really see when you dive into the catalog on the PlayStation 1 in particular is that the ideas of developers that were really moving into 3D space for the first time were so much bigger than the technology allowed, and so a lot of corners were cut. And everything's very jaggy and triangular, because that's what the PlayStation could output in polygons. So there is a lot of great content there to go back and say, no, we can round out those edges and add a lot of texture detail and, make these stories resonate even more than they did back then. And I'm all for it.
Excellent, Snake. Age hasn't slowed you down one bit.
All right, you guys, that's going to do it for our feature today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back very soon with new rundowns and new reviews and interviews, and there's lots of classic content for you to check out as well, so please do that. If you like our channel, hit that subscribe button. If you dig this video, hit the like button. Thanks for sharing, and we'll see you very soon. Until then, play forever.